search. So the ability for homeowners, real estate professionals, real estate agents, the general public to get answers to their search inquiries about a property, not just a search that yields links and documents like you would see in, for example, Google.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk Podcast, a regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Leila Banijamali, co-founder and CEO of Symbium, a technology company that offers a free portal to help folks navigate development regulations and permitting for accessory dwelling units and other permitted use development. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. Leila, thank you very much for being on the show. It is a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you, Patrick. I'm so happy to be here.
You know, I tried to explain what your company does in a couple sentences, but honestly, I'm not sure I did a very good job. Can you do a better job than me, please?
Yes, I can actually. So basically what Symbium does is we launched out of Stanford a few years ago, my co-founders and I, and basically we have this technology that allows us to build certain types of systems, and what we call those are comp law or computational law systems. In other words, we can build systems where the laws and regulations, in our case, the planning rules and codes, are built right into the application. And so what we've done is we've launched Symbium.com, which is a property information portal that will give the public, it's kind of like a Google Maps for planning. It gives you turn-by-turn directions and visualizations of what you can actually do on a particular property, any property, starting with California.
So I did a little test on the website, and I picked this arbitrary lot in Berkeley, California, and brought up my imaginary house and asked the program, or it gives you the option, can I put an ADU there? And it was quite cool. And it can tell you other things about the property, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So, we started with an ADU tool because California has, as many other states, a housing crisis. And there's a new regulation at the time that was passed that allows homeowners to build up to 2 accessory dwelling units on their properties. And this was a new, sort of a newer concept that was really picking up steam. No one really owned the market. We figured, let's come in and let's use our technology. I think it was a great use case to help the public understand, can I build an ADU on this property? What can it look like? You can even select different designs from builders and ADU architects and developers that were uploaded onto the site. And how far can it be from the setbacks? So how big does it need to be? Just to give an idea to the public of what can I do? What am I allowed to do? And what is required of me? And of course, all of the next steps to get it built on your property. So the idea is the portal is able to analyze the laws and regulations in planning as it applies to your particular situation. And we started with ADUs. Other things you can do are visualize the built environment around you in 3D mode. So you can get a sense of what are the other buildings, how high are they, how far are they from the structure that you're reviewing, as well as permitting history for any property. You can actually click on different lots and it'll give you an overhead view. It'll give you a satellite view. You can see the permit history to understand what's been built on that property or what can I build on mine.
So, for example, if your property was a former gas station, you might want to know that, right? Because you might have groundwater contamination or other things. And you would know that by looking at this 3D rendering of your neighborhood, right?
That's exactly right. Yep.
Can you talk about some of the development pressure that led California and other places to adopt rules for ADUs on an existing property? And how common are these statutes now? I keep hearing of more places where this is happening.
Yeah, so California legislation. I mean, it's the legislation. There's statewide legislation, and then there's local jurisdictional regulations, which is basically all planning regulations, right? It depends on which city you're in, and that's the reason why it's so hard for builders to jump from one city to another city, because then they have to understand, or contractors, I should say, and architects, they have to understand a whole new set of regulations. And so that also keeps prices in the construction industry quite high, since the competition can be, there's not enough competition, I think. So, those are sort of like two examples, but I see an acute need for Symbium in every state. It's not just California, and California, as you know, has that housing pressure. It's highly underserved in terms of housing units. And when the ADU regulations passed, ADUs were already a thing, but this became sort of forefront. It became a topic of conversation. And not only have we been approached by sort of planning leaders and technology officers in the state and local jurisdictions asking us, when can we configure the rules for their jurisdiction on our platform? But we've been approached by other countries who are interested in what we can build together, to streamline the development process. So, we've become pretty networked within these government sort of spaces, and have some amazing proofs of concept for this initial momentum. But it is, I think, to answer your question, the housing crisis is what spurred this initially. And I believe that it's going to have the same impact in other states as well. There's another type of pressure that is coming from the public. And that is, the public wants to know and have control over their data and understand what is it that, for example, the government knows about me, and how can I correct that? Let's say the assessor's office or the county office has information about my property that says my house is, for example, 1,500 square feet or 1,000 square feet, when that number is actually incorrect. I ought to be able to change that number, and I ought to be able to do it very, very quickly, in the same way that I go to Amazon and in a few clicks I make a purchase. That's the kind of control and the kind of vision that we have.
Only it's much harder because you're not dealing with a technology company. You're dealing with this bureaucracy, and they're little bureaucracies, right? That's got to be very challenging, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, it's not just that. I think, the nice thing about regulations is that they are published and available to the public. We don't need to ask anyone for permission to take those regulations and do something interesting with them. I was a lawyer for many years prior to becoming one of the co-founders and the CEO of this company. And as a lawyer, I became interested in eliminating the redundancies in the public's experience of the law. That work then led me to a fellowship at Stanford, where I met my co-founders and where we eventually launched our company, Symbium. But there's so much that the public can do just to take initiative to do without having to worry about getting into contract with governments. Of course, then that becomes the question is, what then is the business model if someone's not paying you to do it?
I want to talk more about that, right? So recently, while browsing my community's Facebook page, a gentleman was trying to organize a group to oppose all new development in our town, like without exception. His plan was to go to every zoning meeting with other town residents and speak out against any proposal that involved any new homes. I suspect
I think that guy is in every city in America. What was that guy's name again? I forget.
As you point out, this is very common, right? Why do you think there are folks like this in every town? What's going on?
It's the same reason that there's folks in, for example, the government space. They just don't want to see change. They're quite happy with the status quo, and you leave me to my thing. I will leave you alone. I just don't want to. Well, I will not leave you alone. Not only do I want my, freedom of speech, but I want freedom of your speech too. And I want, freedom of telling you exactly what to do. That's the problem. So, I think from a perspective of, trying to make a sale to whoever, whether it's government or whether it's the general public, and trying to get someone on board. I don't know why people, push back on certain things. And to be honest, it's not the business of the company to be pushing forward an opinion of why certain developments are superior to others or anything like that. It's just our job to make the regulations as they are accessible to the public so that they can make their own decisions, whether you're someone who supports the development or whether you're someone who's against it. you're still going to use Symbium, just as you would still use Google to get from point A to point B. Google doesn't dictate, much about what the map is. The map is already there. They've created it by doing a lot of their sort of machine learning and the algorithms and satellite imagery and all kinds of stuff like that. And then they present to the public. It's up to you to decide how to use Google Maps. And that's exactly the approach we're taking too.
That's very interesting. So you alluded to it earlier. The Symbium website is free to users, but I'm betting it wasn't free to build, and I'm sure it's not free to maintain. So how is it being paid for?
We actually are a sort of Silicon Valley accelerated growth company. We are we're venture backed, just like many of these companies, including, what Google was one day a long time ago. And we are making a bet that the public wants to see these types of systems built. And we are making a bet on usage, because it doesn't always come down to, sales and, for example, enterprise sales, but it does come down to, there is also a high value in just getting a significant number of users to use your service. And so, we think that that is a more important and a highly valuable offering. We also do have...
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you? But how does that pay the bills, just having enough people use the service?
Yeah, we actually do have some enterprise sales, Patrick. So we do have solutions that we've developed that we have deployed in different planning departments to sort of streamline their processes. And that gives us some insight into how we serve the public to then mirror what the regulations are on the government side. But that's sort of what I can say right now is we do have some enterprise sales as far as revenue is concerned. But right now, revenue is not our main focus. Our main focus is just to get people to use it. I think revenue will present itself over time once we have a system that has high usage. So we are taking an unusual approach to launching a company, but there's plenty of other companies out there that have started on a usage-based system and figured out their business model over time.
So back to my random property in Berkeley. I found that California allows an ADU on the property. Does that mean that Berkeley has to allow an ADU? Is it up to the individual community to decide if they want to adopt these statutes, or is it California law that all municipalities have to have similar rules?
Yeah, so that's correct. It's exactly what you just said. It's California wide, and the state has basically said if you own this type of property, as of right, you have a right to build X on it. Now, the individual jurisdictions also have a right and also, quite frankly, a responsibility to enact their own local ordinances within those limits as well. But the idea is that they're not supposed to eliminate the initial right that was afforded to the people by the state.
Is your website sophisticated enough to know community by community what the respective rules would be?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so we have, in the case that we have formed those partnerships with cities, we have incorporated those local ADU ordinances in there so that it gets much more granular with regards to things like setbacks and whether there's off-street parking requirements, for example, for ADUs. What are the forms that need to be filled in that particular jurisdiction? But for the jurisdictions that we're not partnering with them, at the very least, the statewide rules apply. So even then, someone will get an idea of what's possible. And, at the end of the day, we always say, you really ought to talk to your contractors and architects that our system doesn't actually build the thing for you. You'll want someone to actually come to the site, check the grade, see what kind of foundation needs to be laid, what other work needs, what's the access like. So those are things that someone needs to address in person.
You mentioned Amazon earlier. Someone asked you a follow-up question with that. Can you imagine that your company could at some point evolve to where it is a turnkey, where someone wants an ADU unit and figures it out on your site that you can do it, and then conceivably you could have that built for them, right?
Conceivably, I don't think that we're in the business of building, and I don't foresee a future where we are the builders. I think we see a future where we help people and individuals to empower themselves to do things, including contractors and architects. There's lots of contractors, architects using our system, in fact. But,
I'm sure that would be very helpful for them to know if a client's wishes are a non-starter, right? I don't even have to go out to the site now to evaluate it. I can bring it up on this website and know if the kind of development they're proposing is even allowed. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, when you talk about Amazon, I mean, there's a sort of a formula that has to be in place, and at least a very small market that you need to win at the outset before you decide that, well, now we're going to be Amazon and be sort of everything under the sun. The technology that we employ to build systems like this is vertical agnostic. In other words, it can be applied to any space really that's highly regulated. And if you think about it, every space is highly regulated. Even playing video games, there's rules behind those too. Just like X's and O's, you can move an X after an O moves and only in the spaces that are available. But the key components for a system like ours, which is what makes us so unique and sets us apart from everyone else in the space, is three components. The first is search. So the ability for homeowners, real estate professionals, real estate agents, the general public to get answers to their search inquiries about a property, not just a search that yields links and documents like you would see in, for example, Google. The second is data, all of the data about my property in one place, right? You need to have that, and it needs to be searchable and organized. And finally, services. And this is where the comp law portion of our work comes into place, where you have control over what do the regulations mean for my particular situation in an instant, in just a few clicks. In the case of ADUs, Symbium is not just listing the regulations that are applicable in that jurisdiction. We've incorporated them right into the web application so that you can visualize what's allowed on your property without having to guess or without having to perform that work yourself or hire someone to do it.
It's very interesting. I love that you could propose a space, visualize in 3D, and for folks who are trying to imagine what this is like, it looked to me a lot like a SketchUp model where it orbits and, you can look at it in plan view or in elevation, or you can have a combination. It's pretty darn cool, I got to say.
Yeah, I agree with you, Patrick.
I wouldn't have any idea, like even the first step of designing software like this. Is it just an idea? What was the genesis? How did you folks want to start doing this?
When we were at Stanford, we had this technology that had this sort of, at the time we had experience, or my co-founders, who were at the computer science department. Michael Genezareth is professor there, and the director of Codex, which is the program that I was in. And then my co-founder, Abhijit Malpatra, who is our CTO, was working on these particular applications and trying to experiment with, what are the practical uses of this type of technology that basically can analyze the regulations for a particular situation. And we experimented with all different kinds of areas, everything from healthcare to academic program sheets to help students understand, which order of classes they need to take just by clicking a few links, and in order to graduate. And, the VA, for example, was a project. So there's a number of different use cases we identified. The nice thing about government is it is the largest industry on the planet. And it is the one, it's not financial services, it's not insurance, it's government. And the nice thing about that is, another nice thing is no one's really figured that space out. I mean, we've seen a lot of companies come into the space, that are already established, like Salesforce, SAP, and they never did a really great job of cracking that space. And there's some good reason for that, but planning, we thought, was the core of every city's activities. And we figured if we could solve that, the hardest problem, we could really do anything. And that's what we're on our way to.
So we were introduced by an email to the FHB podcast describing you and your startup company. Part of it really jumped out at me. It said, inspired by her experience growing up in the Middle East and also as a first-generation immigrant, Banijamali's lifelong mission has been to empower individuals and small business with a DIY approach to complex processes so that they are in control of their rights ab initio. And for starters, you're going to have to tell me what ab initio means. And did I even say my Latin right? I don't know.
Okay, so it's Latin. So ab initio just means from the beginning, right? So the idea is that you ought to, my co-founder said it best in a white paper that he wrote, Mike Janazareth. He wrote that, you should be able to drive your car from point A to point B across state lines, for example, from California to Arizona, and the car should tell you, you need to slow down because the speed limit is different here. And oh, by the way, throw your weed out the window because it's not legal in Arizona. So, it should be able to tell you at the time that you need it, at the very beginning, not after the fact, after you've been pulled over. And, so that is exactly what I'm interested in. Similarly to when I was practicing law and representing, hundreds of tech founders as outside counsel, really helping them understand how they can basically perform due diligence up front so that they can protect themselves. What are the steps that they can take, easy things that they can do and they should know about. And my teaching, what I learned back from them, is that they want systems that are instant, that are in their control, at their disposal. They don't want to hire a lawyer for hundreds and maybe sometimes thousands of dollars an hour to provide them with legal advice. That person who's getting paid by the hour is incentivized to take their time.
Sure.
And so I built a system called Startup Documents to streamline a lot of that, the Delaware incorporation process, the California LLC formation process, the generation of the documents that are relevant for those new companies. And, I pissed off a lot of lawyers in doing so, but I also caught the attention of some folks at Stanford who started inviting me to their groups. And that's how this whole thing spun about.
So can you talk about your childhood in the Middle East and what made you want to help people with their, legal issues, even if they were like CEOs?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, there was zero connection between my childhood in the Middle East and wanting to help people in their legal issues. I went to law school because my parents said, you really have to go to law school. I mean, when I was growing up, they were like me, first generation immigrants. They had to start from zero. And so they really had to, in their minds, we either had to become doctors, engineer, or lawyer. You have to choose one of those three and everything else is not a real profession. Right. So I actually didn't want to go to law school. But when I got there, I was like, yeah, OK, fine. I'll just do this and I'll get over it. And it actually turned out to be pretty cool because even within that, I was able to find something that I really liked. But, the perspective that growing up in the Middle East gave me was an openness to cultures, because I went to an international private school where there were kids from all over the world. And I was able to enjoy and appreciate so many different perspectives and cultures at such a young age. So that openness was extraordinarily valuable. I didn't know at the time, but I do know now.
What made you want to move to California? Or is that where your parents settled initially?
No, they settled in Canada. I did too. And then I came here initially for a tennis scholarship. I was playing tennis. It was quite competitive. I went to USF, but I actually didn't accept it when I got here. I said, I don't want to play tennis. I just want to study. I was quite a geek. I spent a lot of time at the library, kind of like away from humans. Don't talk to me. I just want to read. And so, I just read about San Francisco as this melting pot in the U.S. I was interested in the U.S., but I was interested in San Francisco as this melting pot of entrepreneurship, and Silicon Valley had already made waves with Apple and Google. And so when I came here, Facebook was just sort of in its nascent stages, and other companies as well. Twitter wasn't even around yet. So I was really kind of, at the sort of foundation level of hearing different ideas all of the time. Everywhere you would go in a cafe, you would hear people's new ideas and their, dreams. It was quite exciting. I just wanted to be around that because I also couldn't stop the voices in my head telling me about, all the things that I wanted to do as well. Similarly, if you go to LA, you go to a coffee shop and all people talk about are their entertainment projects. So, it's pretty cool.
Folks who help advance housing issues, and you made a point to say that your technologies can be used in any way, but for the sake of argument, folks who help advance housing issues are sometimes vilified by others who don't. Have you had any uncomfortable or threatening interactions with folks who think that your software is helping push a development door open they don't want opened?
No, I have heard from people, when we give demonstrations, I've heard people introduce, the company and say something like, well, this is what they're doing sort of in the ADU space and kind of making those regulations easy for everyone to understand. Although, as an aside, I just want to say I hate ADUs. I mean, I've heard that before. And, the response to that is, it doesn't matter what you hate, or it's none of my business and nobody cares, but the thing is, that's not exactly what I was talking about before, is it's not our job to judge that or promote a particular type of development or anything like that. It's just our job to take whatever laws and regulations are there and mechanize them. And so we haven't heard too much about that. And I anticipate that we may, and that's okay. It's people need to vent. And, to those people, I would say, first of all, there's other ways that people will find out all of this information.
It's public. It's all public.
Private information. All of this information that we use is public information, is publicly available. We just organize it so that the public, the people who like projects, the people that don't like projects, the people that don't care either way, can access it when they need to. So that's our point.
So this is my favorite part of the show. Can you please tell me about your own house? Where is it? What's the style? Do you have an ADU? Do you want one?
Yeah, I want one. Yes. But unfortunately, my particular house is too small for one, so it will not fit anywhere. My house is exactly 10 feet wide, wall to wall, and 100 feet long. And so it is more of a Tokyo style build. From the outside, it looks like shipping containers, but it is not shipping containers. It's steel and glass, and it's a highly efficient build. It is 1 bedroom, 1 bath. We're talking about a development that is a highly efficient use of space in a dense area, and I'm proud of it. I think it's really cool. It's amazing, what we can live in terms of the types of space that people actually need to live is actually much smaller than what most people think.
Oh, I totally agree. I live in like 780 square feet, I think it is. It's less to clean, Leila. That's what I always tell people.
Totally. Yeah.
So was this your first house or have you had other properties?
I've lived in condos and apartments. Mostly I've been living in big city. So that's normally where I'd been living. But, so nothing too large. But, one day I would love to have an ADU. And I think it would be great, even if it's not rented out for example, my aging parents to live in it, that would be really interesting to me.
Yeah, I think that's one of the great things about ADUs is the multi-generational living that allows people. It's a cool thing.
Totally.
Who the heck wants to be in a nursing home, right?
Exactly, right. And Patrick, and when you come visit me in San Francisco, you could stay there too. So
I can't wait. I couldn't have stayed in San Francisco any other way. It has been a pleasure talking to you, Leila. Is there anything you want to tell or ask our listeners before we part company?
I think for people to just use Symbium.com. I know, I don't know where the majority of your listeners are. Unfortunately, we've only launched in California so far, but we will launch in other cities and states, hopefully soon. But, I think, just make yourselves heard. If you are dissatisfied with, the status quo, especially with regards to how government runs things, present to them other options instead, not just complaining, but presenting productive options, whether that's technology or something else. I think that those voices need to be heard.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Leila for joining.
We're not talking all day?
Maybe after we stop recording, we crack some beers and we'll finish the rest of the day. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Thanks again for listening. Leila, you were awesome.
I know. Thank you. Bye.